Hello everybody, and welcome to today's session in which we're talking about cybersecurity and business analysis. And once again, joined by three excellent guests to talk about that very topic. But let's let them introduce themselves. And Mohamed, perhaps we can start with you, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Mohamed Zahran. I'm from Egypt. I work as the cybersecurity business partner for one of the financial service company in Egypt. This is a shifting from my role as a business analyst, expanding the perspective of my role from traditional business analysis to the cybersecurity analysis as part of the group growing and infrastructure expanding across the country.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohamed. And being in both camps there, I'm sure you have a little bit to say on the topic. So thank you and welcome. And Chris?
Yeah, hi. I'm Chris Greenham from Auckland, New Zealand. I've been involved in cybersecurity and business analysis, more so in across the telecommunications sector, health sector, and now working for a global consulting company for a number of clients, looking at their tech platform domains and helping them address their tech debt problems.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And last but not least, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Cross. I'm a self-employed business analyst. I've been in IT for about 25 years now, business analysis for about a dozen. And in the last 8, I've been specializing in cybersecurity, working across a number of industries, including telecommunications, financial services, and law.
Thank you very much, Mark. And you also talk at various events. I saw you at the recent BA Managers Forum.
Yes, I'm a fairly regular feature at business analysis conferences. I've spoken at the European Business Analysis Conference and the North American Building Business Capability Conference as well.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing you at least one of those in the near future.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thanks, gents, for introducing yourselves. So let's get started in terms of how does cybersecurity and the role of the business analyst intersect? And Mohamed, if we can start with you on that question, please.
There's a lot of area of intersection. Like I'm just saying, first of all, let me answer this question from two hats, one from the cybersecurity man and one from the business analyst. As a cybersecurity, first thing I learned when we do an architect for the infrastructure or the enterprise security, because the right term is business enterprise security. It's not a cybersecurity. Like what the people say in the SAPS Institute, first thing we start is the business requirement. If you have you been ever in the SAPS world and know how the SAPS methodology is applied? They're starting by the business requirement, and they spend a lot of time. If the business requirement is not available, to train your guys how to gather the requirement and develop the business artifacts. It's business driven. So as a cybersecurity analyst or whatever function I'm doing in this domain, I need to know what is the requirement, what is the objective, how the system should work, so I can build my control around this function. So I keep thinking that my role as in cybersecurity is to use the control, utilizing them in a way to make the systems able to do their function in a secure way, not to bit control, to use control to stop the system to function somehow. This is from the cybersecurity side. As a business analyst, one of the challenge is to get the security requirement at the front, at the beginning, not after we deploy the system. Usually what happened in the last 10 years in the Middle East, we're starting by getting the requirement system is deployed. Once we go to the pen test activity and security architect review, we discover that we are missing a lot. So usually we talk about 50% of the budget is redoing the work. But if we get this requirement at the beginning, like I know that this kind of transaction needs a certain controls, like a maker or checker or third level approval, for example, or I need to store the national information of the citizen in a certain way. And I put that requirement at the beginning clearly to the development and all the team. We reduce at least 50% of the budget. This is a lot of area.
And that point there, Mohamed, actually is very useful from a BA perspective to understand that, you know, we definitely need to ask the right questions and think about cybersecurity early, but also a really valid point about the context and actually isn't just about turning up with some cybersecurity questions, but actually helping the cybersecurity expert actually with some context around what it is you're building, who you're building it for, and why. So
exactly, you cannot secure something you don't understand.
Yeah, great start, man. Thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Mohamed. It's about getting those requirements right in the first place. So as the BA, that's your meat in the table sort of thing that you need to be bringing to the group, and trying to win over these cybersecurity team. They're not comfortable with writing requirements, and they're often not comfortable with telling you what those requirements are. And in fact, they're often very vague, or even tell you, well, yes, we need cybersecurity, but I don't want to be too descriptive. I want the vendors to go away and tell me what we should have. But above all, I need visibility and control. And so you need to be able to take that visibility and control. And what I would do is then start to map out the business process around that visibility and control to understand what are the products that are going to be used by the cybersecurity, or what ones do they already have in play, who are the different roles, and then get to understand those stakeholders and what their needs are. So it's breaking down that barrier by engaging with them, going out there. You're there to learn rather than be the one that's going in there to mentor and tell them what they should be doing. So you need to then structure your questions, and like any good solicitor defending or prosecuting, it's about a line of questioning. And so the key is being able to structure your questions in a way that are going to be meaningful and help you to elicit those requirements, and win over the security team, that they feel confident that you are au fait with what their problem is, and how we should go about addressing those objectives. And then you can start to draft up RFPs, RFIs, business requirements, function specifications, or evaluating products, depending on how you get engaged with the team.
Thanks, Chris. And I think that'll be very reassuring, I think, to business analysts who maybe haven't thought about cybersecurity up to now. Really appreciating that, having that understanding of the process, using the skills they're already using for listing requirements, or understanding the process and questioning and then understanding stakeholders, are all sort of foundational to getting into the detail for cybersecurity. So thanks, Chris. And Mark, be interested in your perspective as well, please.
Yeah, firstly, totally agree with everything that's been said so far. I think when it comes to the intersection between business analysis and cybersecurity, I think there's kind of two different ways to look at this. I mean, the first one, obviously, is that a lot of business analysts are hired onto projects that are driven by information security teams to deliver controls to secure the organization, so like on an umbrella level. So it could be introducing new network segmentation controls, introducing rolling out multi-factor authentication in areas where there isn't already. So that's the first area. The second area is cybersecurity for new capability that the organization is developing. So it could be a new service or change to a process. And I think for me, the second one is the most interesting, and that's where there's the most potential. And Mohamed touched upon this when he said that if you don't catch these security issues early enough, delivering the security is going to cost 50% or more extra in order to do that. And why is that? Well, it's because we aren't just talking about another feature in a backlog. We're talking about a feature that will disrupt all of the other features that have been in there. It's absolutely necessary, as we've seen from so many breaches in recent years. But we need the security to be embedded at the beginning, so that way we can start to build around that in a secure fashion, in order to be able to efficiently roll out safe and resilient products. And our role as a business analyst is to make that happen seamlessly, to avoid disruption in the project later on through late identified requirements, new utilities that conflict with security features, or in the worst case scenario, information security teams withholding approval to release into production simply because a product isn't ready.
I think, I mean, thanks, Mark. I mean, the three of you have more than covered the opening question, so I know I'm not going to add a great deal to it. Other than to say, perhaps from a BA's perspective, I think when I'm talking about cybersecurity or security, or even NFRs in general, rather than just go and ask the business what it is they want, actually we tend to start thinking about like minimum expectations. So what are the minimum expectations on who's going to be authorized to use the system, how we can secure it, rather than this very open question as to what is it you need, which would be probably quite difficult for the business to answer. But other than that, as I said, the three of you have done a very good job of answering that question without me. So great. So in that case, then perhaps we'll move on to another question. I know, Mark, you've touched on a few of the individual roles that we might collaborate with, and I think Mohamed did as well. But I'm going to start with Chris on this question in terms of how you collaborate with IT, cybersecurity teams in order to ensure that the requirements are integrated into the systems that are being developed.
Well, it's usually you're just practicing business analysis 101, and that's running workshops and meetings, sharing documentation with them and asking for them to provide documentation so you get a better understanding around what their processes are, their practices, what policies they have in place, what the hierarchy is, so who are the key stakeholders, who are the decision makers, that you can then start to build up that sort of racy type model around understanding who's responsible and accountable for the activities, and then setting out an understanding of what types of how do we actually structure the communication, what sort of methods do we want to have, both technical and non-technical, because there's actually a multitude of different roles in there. Some are very hands-on. You may have Cisco policy engineers down to people that are managing the security in the internet cloud. And then, of course, some of that may even extend to external vendors. And so you need to be able to potentially engage with those stakeholders to get their view on their product and in the direction with their products to fully understand what the security needs. And then the key thing is also providing continuous feedback to say, this is what my understanding is. Am I on the right track? And are we, am I providing the level of detail that is succinct and giving you the confidence that I understand what your problem is and your objectives are for the requirements.
That's perfect. Thanks, Chris. And again, very reassuring that this would all be within the wheelhouse of the business analyst who's already engaging and asking these sort of questions, hopefully asking for feedback as well, potentially asking feedback for how they're engaging with the security experts, and actually are they asking the right questions as well. Mark, be good to hear your perspective on this one, please.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with what Chris said about most of this being business analysis 101. If you sit in a room with me on any given day, 95% of what I do will look the same as the work that any other business analyst will do. I think that there are a few key differences. I think when you're working in cybersecurity, it's much more important to us than for the average business analyst to properly understand the risks associated with the work that we're involved in. So a lot of business analysts will be involved in looking at what you might consider to be positive value, which is the utility value delivered by a new solution. For us, we often will speak in a different value, which is avoiding the negative value cost of failure to deliver a security feature in time for it to prevent a risk from being materializing. So I think from my perspective, the first thing would be being able to properly articulate to stakeholders the risk of not addressing something in a timely fashion, being able to make sure that you can appropriately prioritize the activity so that any kinds of controls which are likely to impact the design process, the testing process, are addressed early enough for that to happen in a smooth and seamless fashion. And I think also being able to facilitate the communication, because cybersecurity is such a huge field. It touches on every other field, whether it's one of the subject matter domains like human resources or finance, or one of the technical domains. And so we need to be able to be very fluent in all of in translating these requirements and concerns to all of these different stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Chris. And Mohamed?
I like what Mark say about the risk. Our work in that area is risk driven. We have to understand what kind of risk we are facing or may happen and how we handle it. And I used to do this in two different levels. One at the requirement level. We had like a small committee representative from the GRC team, Cybersecurity, Defense, and Security Operation Center team. And we have one from development, testing, and releasing and operation. And every time we have a draft for a requirement document or a requirement sheet, we go to that committee and said, this is the requirement we have, and this is the representation in terms of solution requirement. What do you think we should change to make it fulfill, like, for example, if we're working in a payment industry, the GRC man said, hey, we have to work with the BCI. So give me this is the kind of solution requirement that we have. What we need to change in the process, the storing of data, what kind of data we shouldn't collect, for example. If we're working in healthcare, we have the HIPAA. It's one of the ISOs for security related. We have the ISO 27001, 2003, 2013. It's about information security. Every time we do it at the very beginning, before we go with the requirement or solution requirement to the customer, and we do it again before the operation. Because one of the lessons we learned in the last 10 years, if the security operations center team doesn't know what kind of solutions they are protecting and the behavior of that solution, we may go to a very wrong direction. I give you an example. 10 years ago, we had a system that it was published online. It was a public system. Everyone in the country in Egypt was using it. It's about a vehicle registration. And one day, I remember that day, we have a huge attack, denial of server attack, came into this website. It was coming from outside the country. And because we gave a clear instruction for the SOC team and the incident response team, this is how the system should behave. They just, in 10 seconds, they just drop all the packets that came outside Egypt, because you're not supposed to use the system outside Egypt. Because they understand how the system is doing, what it's doing, who is using, where it should be open, where it should be open. This is very important. If you not communicate in a clear way at the beginning and even after releasing and operating, you may force the team to take the wrong direction. Like they may use another tool like, I don't want to name a brand of, a name of the product, but denial server attack has a lot of product to work with. This is very important, making a clear message, understand what we work, how the systems work, what we are really protecting, and who is the benefit, who is the beneficiary of the systems.
I think around that point around clear messaging, and I think it's really helpful, the point Mark made as well about thinking about risk. I think it's a really positive way, an easy way for actually stakeholders and business to consider things. And actually, it's probably a really good nudge to BAs to not just ask the really positive questions and actually talk about what happens in this event. How are we going to react? How are we going to stop people getting access? What if the wrong people do get access, etc. So I think those different perspectives are particularly useful. I think on the basis that any BA doesn't have the benefit of you free to reach out to for every project as well, I would urge that another opportunity for any BA in terms of collaboration is to go and speak to the cybersecurity experts and the development leads to actually understand, what those individuals or groups need from the BA to make sure, you know, in advance that the right questions are being asked, to consider as well any other parameters that might need to be thought about. You know, and I know from my experience, you know, I might, and way back in the past, I would have had a list of NFRs or non-functional requirements that I might have recognised I need to speak to the business about, but that's not always effective. Just having a list of non-functional requirement categories that I've come up with, it's more effective if I'm working with the right teams in development, in information security, so that we can actually get to a level and understand the intricacies of those questions, and actually, you know, how the intersect teams, as an example, are going to react to the answers to those questions as well. And perhaps in some cases, it might even be an opportunity to bring the information security experts with us on sessions to actually hear from stakeholders directly about some of the questions as well. So I think that's all I would add. I think the next question that occurs to me, and this is one I'm going to pitch to you first, Mark, in terms of what do business analysts need to know about cybersecurity, or security terms or frameworks, or even current threats, in order to be effective in their analysis work?
So I think at a very, very high level, if I was to just sort of like give somebody sort of like some homework, though, just a few hours to sort of help them get up to speed, I think that there are two main things that I, in fact, actually three main things that I would tell them that they really need to look at. The first is familiarise yourself with at least one cybersecurity framework. If you're in the UK, I would suggest that you go to the National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC's Cyber Assessment Framework, the CAF framework. If you're international, you may want to go to the American NIST website and have a look at their Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. It's both of these websites. Give yourself an hour, have a peruse. It doesn't take you a long time. It gives you an idea of the sort of like the structure of the cybersecurity controls you need to keep in mind, the questions you need to ask. You need to think about asset management. You need to think about identity and access control. You need to think about network security, and these are elements. So you can overlay these different components onto the work you're doing and determine which ones apply. And that way, when you meet with information security teams, you're able to ask the right questions. It's not a process of trying to draw it out of them. You can go in prepared. Second thing you need to understand about security benchmarks. I always direct people firstly to the Centre for Internet Security, the CIS. They've got benchmarks for most technology platforms like cloud security, endpoint security. Talks about how to establish a secure baseline, rather than sort of just having trying to sort of like document everything off the top of your head. It's very easy to say that something needs to align to a particular benchmark, and that way it's very, very clear whether or not the technical components are secure to an appropriate level. And the final thing that I would say is you need to have an understanding about perhaps not necessarily the specific threat actors that are currently active, but the different categories of threat actors that you might be working with. So rather than just having a hacker persona or no negative personas at all when you're planning your systems, have two or three. Have that sort of hacktivist collective persona, have that criminal syndicate persona, have that nation state actor persona, and just think, if you release this product as it's designed into production, what would each of these different types of threat actor be able to do with it? And sometimes what they could do are pretty ugly things if you don't have adequate controls in place. So I think those are the three things that I would suggest that somebody needs to know about.
That's excellent. Thanks, Mark. I mean, I certainly wish I'd had this conversation many years ago, because I know, you know, I've never taken it as far as looking at the cybersecurity frameworks, as you point out, or indeed maybe not thinking about the personas in that way as well. So I think you've given three very practical ways for BAs to really get prepared for the analysis they're doing. So thank you, Mark. Mohamed, What would be your perspective on that, please?
I like the IIBA cybersecurity certifications. The guide itself, which was made between the IIBA and the IIEE Computer Society, it's got a very well structured list of topics you need to understand, just to understand, not to be an expert in it. It's totally different because, for example, when it comes to security, cybersecurity framework and standard, it mentioned a high-level overview about different framework like GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, DSS, NIST, ISO, information security ISOs, and different best practice. But you don't have to be an expert in each one of them and every one of them. You just need to understand the scope where I will need to go and get this standard and open it or communicate with one of the subject matter expert in this kind of standard. This is what you need to know. When I need to apply the NIST, when I need to apply the PCI, when I need to apply the HIPAA for enhanced insurance, for example. This is what the framework, this is where the standard certification talk about. Another point is the security solution. What is the IAM, identity and access management? What kind of encryption and cryptography should I use when I use? What kind of security monitoring we have? What is SOC? What is NOC team? What is an incident response? What is a cycle I should follow and maintain if I have an incident in my system or my product? These all things are totally away from the traditional business analysis training and standard. Something else which I really like about this guide is telling you what kind of question you need to ask to your stakeholder to get the right information. If I'm talking about the access control, if we're talking about data storage, we're talking about even the risk management, how you manage the threat analysis inside the application at the requirement level, even in the operation level. It has a lot of section and topics that open the business analyst mind, that changing the perspective, and it's not related to specific domain. You can apply this set of questions, this set of topics and concepts in any kind of domain you work. I think this is a good start. It's not away from the business analysis. It even uses the same terminology, and it includes at the beginning, I think it's one chapter giving the analyst who's not coming from a technical background a foundation about what is the concept of network, what is a TCP/IP, the foundation thing you need to understand if you are gonna play this game in this domain.
Thanks, Mohamed. And training is really an important and additional aspect to really consider about cybersecurity. That it's probably easy to overlook because we think about training in all other aspects, but of course training is available in all of the cybersecurity concepts as well. One thing I'd ask you to repeat, if you could, is just the name of the training that you refer to. I think I just missed that.
It's a guide, the certification built between the IIBA, International Institute of Business Analysis, and the IIEE, Computer Site. It's a cybersecurity analysis. It's you could have the training, but you can just download the guide and start reading. It's a very easy run. It just needs some time to read.
Yeah, that's the CCA, the Certified Cybersecurity Analyst.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you, gents. And Chris, we'll end with you on that question, if we might, in terms of what BAs need to understand.
Yeah, sure. So building off everything that Mark and Mohamed were saying about it's having that foundation knowledge around all that, what I call is the slap and crap stuff. So it's around the information that if you don't do it, you're going to get your hand slapped because you're going to get a legal lawsuit coming against you because you've breached a policy, data is being accessed and being federated out around into the public domain. And so you need to understand what those are. And then the crap stuff, that's really around the capacity and reliability within the network that you've got in there. So you need to not only have that foundation knowledge, but you need to also now focus on the internal parts of your business and understand what the business is. A lot of businesses typically run with Microsoft as a platform, and therefore you should start to familiarize yourself with Microsoft security standards, the Azure platforms and things like that, and then expand out from that and then say, well, okay, you might be having a Splunk tool there, so understand what Splunk does for you, and then how do we actually provide that which I mentioned earlier, the visibility and control. So how do you poll the network and pull back information? So what tools do you have in place that you provide that? You might use ServiceNow, for example, that could poll out and sets an agent out there on the network and pulls back information, or you might be using Cisco Secure Networks helping with your network segmentation, and that will pull up details around the northeast, west, south interactions with the gaps, and then you looking at how do I define policies as code, looking at software defined network reference architectures is another area that you need to start thinking about too, and building out some sort of knowledge there. So yes, have that foundation knowledge around the industry and regulatory standard stuff, but then you need to also focus on getting a good understanding around, this is the company that I'm working for, what is it that they have that makes them unique, and then they may use flavors of those foundation stuff for the regulatory environment, such as, do you deal with credit card payments, and therefore I need to understand how PCI DSS applies in that environment, and then how do they handle the voice call and the handling of separating the agent away from the customer, giving through their credit card detail numbers and things like that. So it's understanding those basic business activities that go along with that fundamental regulatory compliance stuff that needs to be in place as well.
It makes me think, Chris, I was working with a client a few years ago where actually we were introducing technology controls into their process, and more than one of them would have been around security. And actually just having awareness that these controls exist, having an awareness for the background information that supports them, and also having awareness, as in this case, that actually there was high-level stories or epics injected into every project to make sure that there was traceability back to these quite fundamental topics. So there was no way that BAs or indeed the wider delivery team weren't thinking about cybersecurity in one way. Certainly got me thinking about that. So thank you very much, Chris, and gents, for that question. And I know, Chris, not only yourself, Mohamed and Mark, over the last few questions and half an hour, have talked about a number of different techniques and thinking about process. But I would ask, is there any other points you might want to share, starting with you, Chris, in terms of how BAs can incorporate cybersecurity requirements into their business analysis process?
Well, to me, security is one of the fundamental non-functionals that you're going to have. So for every function that you describe, there is a security component, and it's around authentication, authorization, hidden fields, or who can role permissions and things like that. So these are all components that lead into the overall cybersecurity model that the company has in place. Whether you're defining APIs, for example, I've seen a lot of API system specifications that have been drawn up to draw RESTful APIs, but they miss the two fundamental security controls that should be in place: is who's the system that's calling the API and who's the user within that system calling the API. So I can now build a audit control record and a log to say, yep, it was Salesforce, it was Chris Greenham calling to talk to SAP to create an account or to look at a financial record, and then understand, does Chris have that authority to go and look at that information? And then around that, you're looking then user entity behavior analysis, and then trying to identify, is that end user entitled to be viewing that information? Are they using a device that's approved to access that data? Are they in a location that is recognized as being within the company? And it's not Chris Greenham from New Zealand, but it's somebody called Chris Greenham is accessing the financial information from Prague. So that should then detect an anomaly, and potentially a security threat should trigger an event, and that should then drive through to that visibility control to trigger a notification to the appropriate actions there. So it's understanding those sorts of information flows is critical for you as a business analyst, and getting that information. So process down to your, and then link your process tasks to your requirements, and then your requirements to your acceptance criteria, and then you'll build out the a relationship with the non-functionals through that.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. And particularly that point around talking about what happens after the security threats are triggered as well, rather than just the process up to leading up to. Mark,
sure.
did you have anything you wish to add in terms of how we incorporate cybersecurity requirements?
Sure. And first, I just want to thank Chris for very eloquently clearing up. A lot of people think of security requirements as being purely non-functional. They really aren't. In fact, I'd say the majority of them probably do have a functional component, such as sort of like when condition A happens, you need, or somebody tries to access sensitive data or a privileged function, always enforce multi-factor authentication. That's not a non-functional requirement. That is a very clear functional requirement, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. When I think about the way in which I approach the business analysis process from a cybersecurity perspective, I think the methodology which I find most useful is called SQUARE, the Security and Quality Requirements Engineering process. Very simple methodology. You can Google it. It will take you just sort of like half an hour to read about it. It identifies 4 activities that I would say aren't sort of like the core of the business analysis activity in general. And what that adds to the process, particularly early on, is it encourages you to think about establishing common definitions between yourself and other teams. So, for example, understanding in your organization what cybersecurity framework has been adopted, what standards have been adopted. Presumably, in most large organizations, you'll embrace ISO 27001. You might embrace NIST. You might embrace. You might have various other frameworks that are being applied to you by the regulator. So understanding all of those so that you can sort of facilitate communication. Second one, have reusable artifacts that you can bring out and use again. So a lot of these security requirements you'll be seeing time and time again. They're basically sort of like should be standard, the standard operating procedure when you roll out a new application. So for example, if you have a particular web application firewall or something like that, it needs to be in place to secure your externally facing APIs against threats. You need to have a requirement to say that this new self-service interface has to connect with that web application firewall to make sure that it's protected. So you need to have your own internal catalog of those that you can pull out when required for new projects. And the other 2 are understanding how to do risk assessments, so you can evaluate where you need to focus your attention, which things, when they come up in your project, immediately light up that light bulb over your head and say, I need to get cybersecurity involved because of this particular issue that we're touching on in this project. And finally, it's understanding about prioritization. Like I said earlier, when you're prioritizing a backlog, don't just think about the balance of the effort to deliver something versus the utility value it delivers. You need to factor in the third variable, and that is what additional risk cost that would expose the organization to if it's uncontrolled. So you need to balance up those 3 values to work out how important it is to deliver this particular feature as it is as part of the project. So I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, sorry, Mark, really thorough that point there. Thank you very much. And Mohamed?
Oh, thank you, Mark and Chris. I really value what you're saying, but we do it exactly as you both mentioned. We do it at the application layer and service layer. We do it at the process layer itself inside the organization and how we communicate with our external partners and stakeholders. Because, as Mark said, most of the security control are function requirement, not non-function requirement. Most of the work we do it at the function level. You have to do this process this way. When you ask to reset your password, you need to have an OTP. When you would like to do a kind of transaction, I'm sorry, but you have to call an agent, and the agent has to call you and ask you a few questions. If you want, as a call center agent, review some information about the customer, you need to have a second approval from your manager and justify. And sometimes, for example, our testing team, this is what we have now. They need a copy of the production data to test some scenarios, but they cannot access the real data. So it has to follow a certain process to normalize, and no one can find anything or can extract any information from this data. At the end, it's this data just inside the organization, but it has a process. So we do it in different levels, but the most important one is the function requirement, because most of people think, as Chris said, it's just an annex about the non-functional requirement, should how the system should do, but really the real risk is the function level. The pen test team is doing a great work testing the function requirement, not the non-function requirement.
So I would totally echo that point, and that, you know, it's really refreshing to hear that it isn't just being bucketed under NFRs, and actually it's more, you know, we have to think about security and cybersecurity in the context of all interactions with the system, and actually, and the point I had written down before this session was really around user journeys as well for this point. So I think it's quite important for BAs to think about security by looking at actually a user journey. So how whether it's the InfoSec team, whether it's the business, whether it's those monitoring, whether it's compliance, whoever it might be, how is security in its own right as a function to be managed as part of the user journey? So thank you very much on that one, Jez. Mohamed, I'm going to ask you, if I may, in terms of, you know, we've talked about requirements. We've just conveniently talked about the fact it isn't just an NFR, so it opens up a bit of scope here. But are there any particular kinds of requirements that you would typically use or expect BAs to use when it comes to cybersecurity type information?
It's hard to say that I have a specific list or some kind of requirement. It's, as I said, it's about, for example, if I'm talking with a customer list of who will access the system, just need a kind of security at which one should do what and who cannot do some kind of action. And so this role had access to all the function or one function. This is a kind of security at the level of security. If we are talking about whether we go for a mobile app or a web app or desktop app, answering this question is related to security. Security is not. I keep saying it's a holistic view. You need to understand the whole picture. What is the system doing? Who will use? Why we do it? And what actually is the business objective to try to handle this solution? Because sometimes people focus on that we need to have an XDR, an NDR, an EDR, a firewall, an access control. We just go get all the controls you have and put in the system. And it results that the system is not functioning well, because this is not what we should do. We should understand what the system should behave and what is the objective we try to fulfill, and then set this requirement. And this is beginning at the function level. When I'm starting to just ask a simple question, it will be a web or mobile app. Who will access? Should we do it on a cloud or on-prem? Where the data will be stored? Who will access the data? Who will see the dashboard? A simple question. We have a dashboard. Who will access the dashboard? What kind of information we should have in the dashboard? And this is not required a security control to have like a firewall or device or some kind of certification. It's about what is the risk of availing this data to someone who shouldn't have access? What is the risk will happen if we just, for example, we have a famous case I was talking about yesterday. One website was mentioned on the social media that it is under attack. The data center admin switched off the website. So it ends up that anyone opens the website, it will be not working. But in fact, it wasn't under attack. The data center admin realized that, okay, people would try to visit, so let's get it down a little to avoid what will happen. But in fact, it was no attack. This is a message. This is a kind of security is holistic view. It's not the one-way shot or a list of requirements. You need to consider it in every aspect you work and related to your product and service.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Chris?
Yeah, but mine basically goes back to building off what's been mentioned before, and from both Mark and Mohamed and yourself, John, around the core stuff that we do at the functional level, but actually as a business analyst, you need to understand that security and cybersecurity, in fact, actually goes across all three levels of business analysis. It's at the strategic level, the tactical level, and the operational level. So quite a bit of the stuff that Mohamed was talking about was really at that operational level. But when you look at strategic level, you need to, Mark referred to was around the risk management and security governance, the policy development type activities that need to be going down. And then one that's always a favourite of mine is the business continuity planning, and who do you actually get involved in doing that? So it becomes a much broader group. It's not that cybersecurity team, it's architects, it's business service owners, and it's the service owners, the tech platform owners. And then if you've got a multi-vendor environment, then you've got a cast of 1,000 that you're having to try and establish what their business continuity planning is going to be, and who's going to be responsible for handling things, and what the service level agreements and service level management that needs to be put in place. And how do you identify things, particularly in your CMDB around criticality, like working in the health sector, you've got applications which are patient, life-threatening, and if they're not running versus somebody not getting paid, which one do you focus on first, sort of thing, where the threats are. We had a major hospital here in New Zealand got hacked with a cybersecurity, and it basically shut down their whole business down there, and it had to be going back to a paper-based record keeping to do patient administration, because it took 6 months to actually put all the gear together to rebuild the network. But eventually they got it up and running. Then at the tactical level, of course, is where you need to be working with the solution architects and the security teams to understand that security architecture that's been put in place. So what are the products and platforms that you have? And then how does project management work around that activity? And then within that tactical level, you're then bringing in your ITSM processes, your service design, and service design will go through identifying things around the security standards and practices that need to be put in place. Do we have the right people and training and resources? Do we have the standard operating procedures and so forth? And do we have the service level agreements put in place? Have we actually done the appropriate assessment of vendors to make sure that their products actually meet our security standards? Do we need to do penetration testing and things like that? So that all becomes part of your requirements at the tactical level. And then compliance management comes into that as well. And then the threat intelligence aspects of that come into there. And then, of course, we're back down into the ground earth stuff, which is the operational level stuff, day-to-day user monitoring, security access testing, and change control, incident management activities that need to go around that analysis that you need to be familiar with.
And by you thinking about strategic, tactical, operational, so clearly it just adds another set of dimensions through which to look at security with. So yes, really further good points there. Mark.
I think the other two guests have given really good answers to that, and I think if I were to sum it up, I would say that it's not so much the kinds of requirements; it's more to do with the mindset that you have when you develop those requirements. So for example, I think it's you can develop requirements normally and then sort of seek after the fact to add additional security requirements in a completely reactive fashion. The way that would look like is it's okay if this application is insecure because we can put a firewall on, or we can put some monitoring, so that way we know if something's going wrong. But of course, when that happens, the vulnerability is out there. It's just a question of whether a bad actor can get at it. What leads to a much more resilient application, a better solution overall, is if you develop those requirements with that security mindset, so you can get ahead of the curve and develop built-in proactive security. So what does this look like? So within an organization, it will look, you'd have your applications will be containerized, so that if something is compromised, it doesn't automatically enable somebody to sort of like move around from one application to another, reusing the credentials that one application has. They don't automatically trust each other. There is authentication and error checking to make sure that they're all behaving within normal tolerances. Same with network segmentation controls. If somebody gets inside your firewall, they should not have carte blanche to access any server without checks and balances. And same with identity controls. Just because you are the head of finance in your organization doesn't mean to say that you should have a level of privilege that enables you to see everything in the human resource database. So it's basically when you're designing the capabilities and features that you're rolling out as part of your project, make sure you think about how they're being used and identify suitable controls that enable behavior to be managed to give users the best experience without compromising security. And a couple of resources which somebody could look at if they want to sort of know what this looks like. I'd very heartily encourage people to look at the CISA.gov website, where they've got a couple of frameworks there. First one I'd recommend is Secure by Design. It's about a 20-page pamphlet. Really goes into the kind of things you want to think about when you're designing applications, such as sort of like where to use authentication and where to use validation and not using hard-coded passwords, those kinds of things that will lead to applications that are natively harder to crack, so they don't require as much reactive controls after the fact. And the other one would be reading up on zero trust architecture. So zero trust is sort of quite a popular methodology at the moment. It's not the only way of delivering security, but reading about that, it helps you to understand what the threats are, what they're likely to do, and what sort of like one type of architecture might be that is designed with security in mind from the beginning, in order to make it very, very difficult for somebody to exploit weaknesses in your environment.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'll certainly look into those as well. And it makes me think that, obviously look at it through the lens of security having its own set of NFRs would be one way of looking at what you described. Not to say it's the only way, but we're just recognising that the security component itself has to have reliability, accessibility, and all of those other abilities that we tend to think about, but mainly in the context of the overall solution rather than particularly the security. But I know you've made a few more good points than just that, so I won't limit it to that. But that is what immediately occurs to me. I think as well, I mean, with the limited time that we've got, we'll just zip through one more question if we may, perhaps limited to one competency. But Mark, if there was a particular skill or competency to help a BA effectively consider and address cybersecurity, what skill or competency would you recommend the BAs try and develop?
Okay, so we've already covered the technical side. So the one which I'm going to come into is basically negotiating skills, because you're going to often come across stakeholders that are sort of like concerned about the sort of resource requirements or the cost of implementing security. You need to have the skills to be able to work out how to be able to balance the needs of the different stakeholders to ensure that not only is the value delivered, but also it's delivered in a secure way.
Perfect. Good, great start there. Thank you, Mark. Mohamed?
I keep thinking that as an analyst, if I work on a project and I need to consider the cybersecurity controls and requirements, I need to be doing that from risk-driven approach, like thinking what kind of risk I have. Because sometimes I saw an analyst and cybersecurity team working in a small project, it's limited risk, but they use a huge security controls. Sometimes the cost of securing the system is much higher than the value of the system being breached. So we need to balance it. Like, I shouldn't use some high-tech technology to secure a mobile application just showing a price of the vegetables. This kind of things happening because some people say we have to use the maximum security level, we have to use the high security possibility, but again, what are you securing? What's the value you are securing? So as an analyst, I think I believe that we should consider risk more risk-driven approach when we are assessing what kind of cybersecurity controls we need. Because this is very important. At the end, the cost of securing something must be less or equal the cost of losing this asset.
I think that what I like about that example, Mohamed, around risk is that it's transferable to more than just cybersecurity as well. So it's a really good competence and skill that BA can definitely build upon. You give them far more benefits than just being better when it comes to cybersecurity. So thank you, one. And Chris.
Yeah, my view is I see that the business analyst needs to take quite a holistic view before we actually get down to the nitty-gritty. You need to look at the basic business model around people, process, platform, and information, and understand how cybersecurity fits within that organization across those things. So where are the people based? What sort of training needs do I need to do? Development security policies put in place, and how do I promote the security culture within that organization? And then what are the processes that we have in place? And how do we handle that incident business continuity that we talked about earlier? And then, of course, within the platforms around managing the implementations, evaluating the technology, coordinating with the stakeholders, with the IT and non-IT departments. And then, of course, the information. We've got things like data sovereignty. We need to think about data mapping and classification and the protection environments around that for data loss protection, encryption. So it's taking that holistic view that I think it's more of a business architecture view as opposed to an analysis view.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. So I think what you've all covered there, when we think about risk, we think about the process, almost like the POPIT as well, like the process, the organisation, the people, the IT. We think about negotiating skills, of course, which Mark added. And I think I would just add just curiosity. So being curious about what is cybersecurity, and actually taking the advice the three of you have all shared over the last hour. I think understanding, being open to speaking to your InfoSec contacts and colleagues, find out what they need, and just try and develop and just ultimately to help deliver better analysis so that those that are delivering the solutions can actually consider in the most optimal way security. So I'll add curiosity to that. And I think that feels like a good place to draw things to a close. So certainly my curiosity has been satisfied for the last hour. I've certainly learned a lot and many different perspectives, which I really appreciate, gents. So I think just to close, just like to thank you again for your insights and your knowledge, and thank you for taking the time to share it with us all.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your time.